So I prepared a presentation that I wanted to say for today, but as you've heard Sarah and others over the last day, they have really done a lot of the detailed conversation. And I think the question I'm hearing is, what does the diaspora want? Where do we want to invest our money? And so I thought that maybe I dive into what we've learned over the years at the African Diaspora Network. We're based in Silicon Valley. For some of you who may not know, we're in California. We bring Africans and Friends of Africa together to really have an understanding and a conversation about the continent and the community in which we live. The latter is very important for the diaspora because we cannot do what we want to do, even send remittances, unless our economy in the countries where we live is actually good. So I think being good to both is actually what's going to make the diaspora thriving and even looking outside of the places where we are so we can begin to invest on the continent. And what we have learned at ADN over the years is the complexity and the beauty of the diaspora. When I talk about Africa, we're not talking about one homogeneous society. We're heterogeneous and we're also 54 countries. And I think the beauty for me is actually in the complexity of the 54 countries that we represent. And at times, if we close our eyes and start to think of each other as human beings, we become one Africa, or one human, wherever we are. But there are so many barriers we have to go through in order to reach that point. And so when we ask a diaspora to invest, the first thing we ask is, where is that money going? First, because we are skeptical. We don't trust easily. In order to build that relationship and that trust is what ADN is trying to bring the diasporans together in Silicon Valley, in Washington, D.C., in New York, and in conferences like this. And we do the work through partnership and collaboration because no one person, no one organization, nobody can do this alone. And I think collaboration is going to be key. The private-public partnership is going to be incredibly important. The other thing that makes me incredibly happy, especially over the last year and a half, is how many countries are so interested on the diaspora. Let me start with the United States. In October of this last December, President Biden had the Africa Leaders Summit. It came up 8 years later. In fact, in 2014 is when I met my wonderful brother, Johannes Asefa, who's in the room, also during ALS, the Africa Leaders Summit. We were just new, we did not know what we were trying to do at the African Diaspora Network, and then here comes something called the African Diaspora Investment Symposium. Eric Gouchard, Johannes, and others from the State Department were hosting. To bring it fast forward, we have done it 8 times. And so we just celebrated the 8th annual African Diaspora Investment Symposium this past March, where we had many of you who are in the room, including Stella, at the symposium. Why am I telling you all this? Because the United States has a vested interest in the diaspora, and especially on the African diaspora. And there's right now a plan to create a diaspora advisory committee that is going to be working with the White House and the State Department to ensure that there is an intentional engagement of the diaspora. That's all good. So the geopolitical interest on the diaspora, you look at the European Union, you look at China. But the biggest winner on this, if it's done right, is the United States and Europe, because they have the most African diaspora in their countries. The question is how we, the diaspora, can actually take advantage of it. We're not just immigrants taking resources from any country. We're immigrants contributing to those countries. In the United States, we actually have a $55 billion in savings, and that's a very powerful money that we have. How do we utilize this and we go above and beyond remittances? And so, as we do this engagement to build relationship, to build trust, because without the latter, we cannot do anything. Investment is very personal, but it's also based on trust. Do I trust the person who's asking me to invest in their portfolio? Do I trust the institution? And how do we make sure that we build that trust in order to enhance the capacity of the local communities that we're trying to support on the continent? And I think one of the things that I'm learning at ADN, and I learn because we have to learn, nobody knows everything, it's that we're experimenting because this has not been done before. And the reason is we have not been very collectively advocating for what we need. We are fragmented, let's admit that, and I think it's beautiful. So people say, well, how do you compete with the Ethiopian diaspora, with the Nigerian diaspora, with the Ghanaian diaspora, with the Eritrean diaspora? We don't compete, we actually just exist. And what's beautiful about ADN, and I think we're getting somewhere, is that the people who come, who are a part of the ecosystem, are the people who are really looking beyond their own ethnic identity. Because that's our limitation. No, for me, it's my limitation. If I just tell you I'm an Eritrean, I think that's very, very simplistic way of defining who I am. I'm not just an Eritrean. I only lived in Eritrea for probably 19 to 20 years. The rest of my life has been outside of Eritrea. So I really belong to the US community, and I contribute as much as I can to my community because that is who I am. And then above that, I am a mother, I am a friend, I am a sister, I am a colleague. So we're more than that. We're more than how we define or how people define who we are. And if we want to go above and beyond our ethnic, religious, and country limitation, the abundant opportunity that exists on the continent is immense. But it's also complex and it's hard. And so what are we asking people to do? I really don't know what we are asking, although I know one thing. What we are asking, and at least from our end, is let's have a conversation. Let's talk about the issues that matter to us and to our community. And so I'll bring you to some specific things that we're doing in order to make sure that's what we talk about at ADN, we're showing it in action on the continent. When we started the African Diaspora Investment Symposium 8 years ago, then we saw the first two success of the convening, and we said, so what does this mean? You get together, you talk, where's the action? How does it show up on the continent? What we do in Silicon Valley, what we talk about in the United States, in Europe, in other places. We came up with something called the Builders of Africa's Future. We identify locally owned, 100% African-owned enterprises on the continent. We open up an application, people apply. So the first 3 years, we actually just brought them, we identified 10 to 15, we brought them to Silicon Valley to the symposium, provided them trainings through the Miller Center at Santa Clara University, provided them with mentorship, and then gave them an opportunity to pitch, because we had no money to give them. Nobody was even listening that this was investing or was giving to. Because the skepticism about investing on blacks and especially on Africans is pretty high in Africa, in the United States. And so we have some work to do. But let me bring you to today. Yesterday, I saw a newsletter from our organization. We just announced the 6th cohort of the African Builders of Africa's Future. 10 of them, they're from all over the continent, of which one of them is from Kenya, and in fact, she was hosting the booth yesterday. We already guaranteed and have $25,000, each one of them, to receive $25,000 from the U.S. Africa Development Foundation. I'll tell you how these two things are connected. In the U.S., the Congress appropriates funds for the continent, for Africa. Sometimes you have to be lucky to find where it is and how to get access to it. We got lucky, it took us years, but we have a partnership with the U.S. Africa Development Foundation, whose mission it is to identify grassroots African entrepreneurs and to provide them with the grant they need, no equity, this is pure grant, to help them sustain their businesses. This is the second year that they've given us $25,000 each, and then Sister Rose is one of them, and I'm very proud of you and the people that you serve in your community. So we are trying, I'm not saying we've arrived anywhere. In fact, we're just at the beginning of it. 10 is not enough. So the good news is we just got a request from another potential supporter saying, scale it up, and we will support you. When we get this kind of support system, then who's holding them on the ground? Who's supporting them? Where is the infrastructure? Where's the ecosystem? And I think this is where we need the collaboration. At the bigger level, though, how do we make sure that the Africans from the diaspora also we look into our savings and start to say, I want to invest in this individual because I love the work they're doing. How does the money go? Who's going to make sure that there is accountability, transparency, and so many different platforms are being now discussed, whether it's with the AU, with the Africa Development Foundation, and individual private entities that are trying to create the platform where the diasporans can invest. You can't ask me to invest in one or the other. I need to make a decision, a sound decision, because we're not talking now remittances, which is very transactional. It's one way. It's two-way in a way, because you're giving it to your parents, to your sisters, to your friends, and you're not asking them to give you any return on your investment. But when you're asking a diaspora to give their $25,000 to put somewhere, they're going to say, what is my return on my investment, and how sure am I to get this money? So what are we looking for? I kept being asked, what do you want? Well, I want to get a platform that would enable me to get money on my money. But that's just only a fraction of it. I also want to make sure that the money that I'm investing in is making an impact on the community. The latter is important. We're not just only looking at return on our investment. We're also looking at the social return on investment, the SROI. And these two things are not separate in a way, because you're actually trying to make an impact with your money on the community. At the same time, you also want to make money on your money, because you're not now asking remittances, you're going beyond remittances, now you're saying, I want to be investing. That's on the diaspora side. I think then what else are we asking? We're asking for the governments to enable to create an enabling ecosystem for the diaspora to invest, to really be innovative and creative and be able to do the things that they want to do, whether it's I am interested in Kenya, in investing in Kenya. What are the areas where I can invest in Kenya, and who can I work with? These are going to be critical if we want to go beyond remittances, which means then we're going beyond borders too. And I think these are hard but very important questions to address, and the question is, how are we going to do it? When we leave from this, what are we going to do? And I think this is the hardest thing. We travel from all over the world to be here together. We go to our own work, and work becomes debilitating because you're busy, but then there is this big vision you want to accomplish. I say that we focus on the big picture. Not on the mundane things that we do. They're important, but we focus on the big picture. And the big picture, at least from where I stand, is how do we support this growing youth in Africa? How do we harness the creativity, the innovation of these young entrepreneurs, and to ensure that they have a much better life than their parents? And I think if we can focus on that and look at other examples, yesterday we were talking about Indian diaspora. They are the most uniquely positioned diasporans to make not only an investment in the country where they come, but in everywhere they go. In Silicon Valley, the CEOs and the venture capitalists, they're Indian diaspora, and I'm very proud of them. I cannot stop but say, how can we reach that point? And I think the way we reach that point is by working and collaborating with them and other diasporans, because we are not the end of it all. We are actually a part of that global diaspora. How do we work with them? And so at ADN, we made intentional effort to bring Indian diaspora into our leadership, because of the fact that there is an ecosystem that exists within that community that the African diaspora can tap into. We can only learn from others and collaborate with others to make these things happen. So I continue to be optimistic but I'm always optimistic, so you have to be very careful about what I'm saying. I honestly don't see everything that is a challenge as something that is not that we cannot overcome, although some challenges are incredibly difficult and we need help to get through them. But this is a challenge good to have. You know, if we are going to be a 2 billion continent in a very short period of time by 2050, do we want to take that as an advantage of population, that we use the power of the people to make sure that we continue to promote our entrepreneurs and our human capital? Or do we want to use that as a disadvantage and we end up really misusing the power of the youth? And then we say, what did we do? Why didn't we do this? I challenge me and all of us to think a little bit bigger, be bold, and ask for help to make it happen. We also have to be honest and really authentic about this. We have a long way to go in Africa to ensure that our people are thriving. Why are we talking about remittances? We're talking about remittances because there is a need for employment and other opportunities within these countries that are receiving the remittances. But at the point when we get out of remittances, then we will say, actually, we have arrived at a point where Gambia doesn't need any remittance from anybody because there is an ecosystem. Not only do we not need the money, our people don't have to die, and I'm going to not cry, but I just heard about the 79 people that just sank on the coast of Greek, somewhere on the islands. Can you imagine how painful that is? These are probably Eritreans, Ethiopians, Nigerians, Senegalese, and others, and Gambians, wherever they come from the continent, and from Southeast Asian countries, just lost their lives. These are the migrants that we're talking about. They had a hope, just like you and I, and they're not there. They're gone. So those are the kind of people that inspire me, but I also feel deeply saddened by what happens to them, but that's the journey we have to go through in order to achieve our dreams. So it is not easy. It's not a very straight line road. It's pretty fragmented, and it's kind of challenging and difficult, but somehow we make it. Somehow we get through it. And I'm very happy to be in Nairobi, and I think I'm seeing a lot of progress, a lot of growth. There's also a lot of need, and I look forward to collaborating and working with all of you. And I continue to believe on the diaspora. And I thank the IFAD and GFRID team for making this possible, and I look forward to our collaboration and partnership so that we don't just only talk about remittance, we also continue to talk about remittances and investment. Even though they are two tracks, they're actually the same purpose. In a way, you're trying to make the lives and the lives of the communities on the continent. So I'm really delighted to be here with all of you, and I thank you, and I look forward for more conversation. Thank you.